Hi everyone, it's lovely to see you all. I'm just going to share my screen very quickly. So today, very much we're going to sort of carry on with what we've been doing in previous sessions, which is helping you to learn a little bit more around some of the organisations across Oxfordshire. And we've got a really great group of organisations who are with us today that really do sort of stretch across Oxfordshire in terms of the sectors that they work within. So it's some real differences in terms of what they do. And you know what we're keen for you to do is, one, take that learning, think about how you can use that in the classroom to really bring that your curriculum area to life. I'm going to hand straight over to one of the organisations in a minute, to EKFB, but first of all I'm just going to very quickly touch on the agenda. Just bear with me, it's not letting me move my slides on at the moment. Hold on. Right. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
So yes. In terms of the agenda, just, yeah, obviously, first of all, saying hello. What I also wanted to do is just take 2 minutes to welcome Susan to the team as well. So as I emailed you all a week or so ago, Christina's now left Oxlep. So Susan has taken on the role of supporting yourselves in terms of looking at the activities that you're going to run next year with your Year 8 students. Susan's been with Oxlep for 5 years now, worked with all of the schools, and I know she's reached out to a huge number of you over the last week. And starting to have chats with you and looking at how she can support you. So it's great to have her as part of the team. I will still support on the evaluation process, and I'll run through that briefly at the end of the session today, just to make sure everyone's still clear on that. So thank you for your support, Susan. And as I said, I know you've already spoken to a number of the teachers, so any you haven't, I'm sure we'll hear from you very soon. We are then going to obviously have the employers talk. They'll be talking for 10 minutes each to do a presentation. What I would ask is, during those sessions, if you've got any questions for them, please put them in the chat, because then what we'll do afterwards is we'll come back to them and have that employer panel Q&A when we can filter all those questions out to the employers. And they can be questions for all of the employers if there's something generic you want to ask, or if you've got something you particularly want to ask a employer or a speaker, do just note that in the chat as well, please. And then at the end, I will give an overview of the evaluation process. So I know it's been mentioned a number of times. I'll walk you through the various steps that will take, just so that you're very clear on that process. And then we just catch up if there's any other business that we can help or support you with. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Paddy, who is going to talk about EKFB. Paddy, over to you.
Thanks, Nikki. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see so many of you on the call this afternoon. My name is Paddy Patterson. I'm the Skills, Employment and Education Manager at EKFB. If we could go on to the next slide, please, Nikki. I'll explain who that is. So who is EKFB? So we're a joint venture, which is in our terms just another name for a partnership that brings together 4 companies of international renown in terms of major projects in civil engineering and construction. So we have Eiffage, who are a French organisation. We have CARE, who are really well known to most people, I suspect, on the call as a UK business. We have Wardell, who are Spanish, and we have BAM, who are, although well established in the UK, a Dutch origin company. So again, international flavour there. Idea of bringing together 4 companies on these major projects is it's about expertise and experience. Projects like ours, as I'll describe in a second, are huge and arguably too big for one organisation to really take on themselves. And so what you get here is you get worldwide expertise coming together to work in the UK on a significant project such as this. I think that's a really important learning point for everyone who may be thinking about the construction industry in terms of the scale and scope of what might be possible. So we're a main works civils contractor working on HS2, and our section covers, well, we call it CT3. It covers Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire, Northampton, Warwickshire. And in terms of geography, if we could go on to the next slide, please, Nikki. Hopefully, so that little map at the bottom, which I thought might make sense, but it's probably really small on your screen. So in terms of proximity in Oxfordshire, we're very much sort of our touch points are Banbury and Bicester, very close to both those areas. And as we've said, starting off in Buckinghamshire and finishing off in Warwickshire. So 80-kilometre stretch, 5-year project. All the little dots that you can see on the map, which would obviously look a bit clearer if the map was enlarged, all represent significant points along the project. So things like overbridges, things like viaducts, things like tunnels, etc., are all represented on that. And what you might also be able to see is how that the route is separated into 5 sections, because again, the project of this size, really there's an awful lot of different challenges in each area. So the idea of chunking it up into 5 different sections is again so that each team can focus on its priorities within its own area, and almost work as sort of separate project teams within an overall project. Next slide, please. So who and what is HS2? I'm sure everyone's heard of HS2. I think if you click the button again, Nick, a little video should appear. So everyone no doubt will have heard of HS2, and what you can see sort of appearing on the screen in front of you is a visual representation of what HS2 is and why it's important. There is a little bit probably in the middle of the screen which goes to Leeds. We're aware that that's subject to some recent announcements, but broadly speaking, I think you can see the objectives here and the purpose of HS2 as an infrastructure project. So it's Europe's largest infrastructure project and the biggest UK transport project since the 19th century. The name High Speed Rail is interesting. It would suggest that it's all about speed, but actually it's as much to do with capacity as anything else. The 19th century was significant because that's when, you know, essentially our railway network was built and founded, and obviously 150 years since that's happened, it's become quite tired, quite old, quite inefficient. And so the idea behind high speed, yes, it's about connectivity between the major cities in the UK, but ultimately it's a lot about capacity. So taking traffic off roads, taking traffic off those old railway networks, and working on a much more efficient and cleaner system. So that's really why this is such a significant project. It's probably the largest project any of us will work on in our lifetime, and in terms of scale, it's only when you're really in it, I think, that we can appreciate the size of it. And again, just for awareness, that section at the bottom, which is represented by the dark blue line, that is what you saw on the previous slide, even though we presented it as it sits behind me there. Next slide, please. Yeah, so 30,000 jobs we mentioned on the last slide. So the HS2 project will probably employ something in the region of 30,000 people across the lifetime of the project. Our part, which is part of phase 1, due for completion in the next 5 years. So our section, which is that kind of central bit between London and Birmingham, we expect to create up to 5,000 jobs across the lifetime of the project. And that'll be a split between those that we employ ourselves as EKFB, although all of our people are employed by one of those 4 parent companies, but also our supply chain and also some labour agencies that we employ. So again, looking at the construction industry, again, things like self-employment, subcontracted labour, people working independently, fairly common in terms of how we find people and get them employed on the job. There will be a really broad mix of white collar and blue collar roles. It's a term that we seem to have come to accept in the UK in terms of those roles. So I think white collar we might nominally describe as probably people like myself, who are working at sort of head office, if you like, in supporting roles. And then blue collar being very much the ones that you would expect to see out on site, and possibly liaising in between the 2 venues. Really important phrase that we'd like everyone to take away is that you don't have to be an engineer to work in engineering. Now, I know if I had any engineers on the call, they would say, good luck without us then, if you don't have to be an engineer. I think that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is there's a whole host of opportunities beyond those that you might immediately think of in terms of a project of this nature. I think some really important messaging at this point is that there's opportunities at all levels, whether they be entry-level opportunities, again, in those sort of blue-collar roles, whether they be higher up the food chain, as it were, in terms of apprenticeships, higher-level apprenticeships, graduate roles, etc., etc. So again, lots of different entry points there, and again, those entry points will depend on the type of role, the location, what the person brings in terms of their skills and qualifications, but loads of opportunities. As I said, up to 5,000 jobs, an awful lot of people, skills needed. In terms of skills, what we're looking for, again, it's a really difficult question to answer because we're looking for an awful lot of things depending on the roles. But I think certainly from our point of view, it's about a demonstration of what an individual can do. We would definitely say that things like English and maths will be important. regardless of what role you want to go into. English and maths will always be something that's very important for us. Work experience is very critical for us as well, and that doesn't have to be formalised work experience. It could be more about a demonstration or a way of understanding a person's skill set. So if you've helped out sort of something at the weekends, a lot of people will do things like work with a parent, fixing things, repairing things, etc., etc. I think we certainly, if we were interviewing any candidate at any stage, we'd love to talk about those types of things and be able to understand how an individual solves problems. So I would say that actually things like problem solving skills really, really important, because ultimately a project like ours is very much about solving problems on the go. The design can be perfect, everything can look fantastic, but in practice, when you come to apply that, it's the ability to think and solve problems, which really stands out for us. So whether someone was coming to us as a potential apprentice, whether they were looking for a work experience opportunity, or whether they were working at a slightly higher, more experienced level, things like those transferable skills, communication, and problem solving, really, really important to us. So next slide, please, Nikki. So if you click that again, Nikki, that'll start. So this really links to the idea that you don't have to be an engineer to work in engineering, and this will just keep going and it will populate the slide in front of you. And really the point that we're trying to get across there is that there are so many different roles beyond the obvious ones that you would think of that might have a high-vis vest and a hard hat working on the site. An awful lot of people will join an industry, perhaps in a technical role, but then might move on to managerial, supervisory, project control type roles. So again, what we really want to reinforce to students at all ages is that actually, there are so many opportunities. So an engineer typically might spend an awful lot of time on site, but then as they progress through their career, they may find that their role is a little bit more back office, a little bit more supervisory, as they start to get involved in some more I guess HR type functions as well, and project management. But ultimately, there is a place for an awful lot of skills and backgrounds here. But again, an awful lot of people who work in the sector will have started off through that traditional route. But on the flip side of it, you have people like myself who aren't really from this world. I come through a sort of education and training background and suddenly find myself in the middle of this huge project. So lots of entry points and lots of movement within the industry once you're inside. Next slide, please. And again, just a little slide here just to give a bit of an idea of some of the different types of salaries that people can earn. Again, those will vary depending on the person's age, their experience, their qualification levels that they come in with, and ultimately the project nature itself. So to give our example, generally speaking, the closer you work to a major city, salary potential will be a little bit higher simply because cost of living, but also demand for skills. So there are some roles certainly within that slide where, finding that skill set is really challenging, certainly in the numbers that you need. So ultimately, if people have got a particular set of skills, then they can command a much higher salary, particularly when there are other major projects also looking for those skills as well. So next one, please. And then beyond that, just a sort of maybe one of the last little things for me to think about is, we get very focused on the project at a local level, but one of the things we're really keen for students to have to think about is global potential of a career in an industry such as construction and engineering. So Eiffage, who I mentioned at the start, is our French company. I work for them. And what you can see on the screen in front of you is a representation of how our sort of tentacles spring out across the world, if you like. So we've got major projects in all across Europe and also North and South America, as well as Africa as well. So for an awful lot of people thinking about a career in construction and engineering, really what we want to do is say, actually, ultimately the world can be your oyster if you're prepared to travel and prepared to work on some of these major projects. Then there's definitely loads of opportunities out there. And so in the same way that we've been very keen to bring in expertise from elsewhere to work on our EKFB project, those skills and those individuals will very much be in demand in some of the other projects that we're working on across the world. So in terms of how we're working with schools, how we want to work with schools, I think what we want to do is kind of build a relationship. So we've got a 5-year project and we want to work really closely with schools and students at all ages. We want to do sort of a little bit more than just a, hi, I'm an engineer, this is what I do, type talk, type session, although we recognise there's a place for that. We want to kind of work closely with the curriculum objectives and also achieving the Gatsby benchmarks. We know that that's of massive importance to the school and also the LEP as well. And in turn, from our point of view, the more we can have an input into that, hopefully the more we'll see the benefit in terms of the candidates coming through the system. We're really keen to focus on equality and diversity and inclusion. I think it's fair to say we recognise that our industry does tend to be underrepresented in some of those key areas. But again, for us to hopefully get the benefit of changing attitudes in that area, we need to be a sort of positive advocate for that and input quite considerably. So I think what hopefully you'll see from us is some really positive work in that area in terms of how we've engaged with SEN, in terms of how we're celebrating the diversity in our own workforce. And I think lastly, I know we're focusing quite closely on STEM here, but we think a project of our size can probably work with most subject areas, and we're really open to ideas. I think there's just one more last slide from Nikki. Just getting some pictorial examples of some of the things that we might be doing already, just to give you some ideas of things that we can potentially support you with. So I think at the bottom we've got the traditional human library, someone out to Bicester School to do that, and from one of our local teams. To the left you can see it's a bit of a sneak preview actually. This has not been released yet, but we have through EKFB but also EKFB produced a set of curriculum materials to support French language in schools. So we've got lessons from year 8 the whole way up to year 11, and that's going to be something that we're looking to launch in the new year. So again, something very different to what we would normally do as an engineering project, but again recognizing that those language skills on top of something like a good STEM background could be really good in this sector for the reasons that I mentioned previously. And the last picture for me is the one at the top, which is the Da Vinci Bridge, which is an exercise that we've just started to do in schools. Again, probably appropriate for all age ranges. I've tested it with my kids at home who are a bit younger, and they enjoyed it. And then we worked also with the school last week, year 11's doing it. Really important engineering challenge here, really simple principles, and it's scalable as well. So again, I think some really basic physics fundamentals there, and again, problem solving. You present a student with a pile of sticks and say this is a bridge, or at least it will be once you've done what you need to do with it. Again, a really good exercise and really simple to do as well. And I think that's probably me, Nikki.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Paddy. Really good, great overview and some great examples there as well. Really appreciate it. Are you okay if we leave the questions to the end? So just hold anyone, as I said, pop them in the chat. Any questions for Paddy, we'll come back to them at the end, but I'm going to hand straight over, hopefully, if this works, to, there are your contact details if anyone wants to get in touch, and I'm going to hand straight over to Claire.
Lovely, thank you, Nikki. Hello, everyone. My name is Claire Wardell. I'm a nurse by background. I'm working in Health Education England, which is the education and training arm of the NHS. HEE cascades funding from the Department of Health to support the funding and training and education of our future healthcare professionals. So training our GPs, nurses, occupational therapists, and we work closely with universities on a commissioning process as well. So we want to ensure that we're training the right staff with the right skills to provide that excellent patient care. So I'm going to talk to you. I've got my contact details there on the slide, and hopefully we can share these slides because I do have a number of resources at the end of the presentation. So please do go to the next slide, please, Nikki. So just wanted to give you really an overview of the sheer size of the NHS and about all the opportunities that it offers. We're offering over 350 different roles, and that's not necessarily working with patients. It's vast, the number of opportunities that can offer. And I think speaking to students, I think they're always really surprised to see where the NHS is sitting in terms of one of the world's biggest employer at 1.7 million staff. Thank you. Next slide. And it's really just to get the message across on who delivers healthcare and in what form. And thinking locally, we've got our community trust, Oxford Health, particularly offering those mental health services, our acute trusts, Oxford University hospitals. Even within that OUH hospital there, that has 13,000 staff at least in a variety of areas, and we'll go into some of those specialist areas. We also have charities delivering our services, independent private hospitals, our ambulance healthcare trust, South Central Ambulance Service, social care colleagues also deliver NHS services and general practice. So thinking about our GPs really are our front door of the NHS. And just to give you an idea of GP activity, in one day, GPs will have over 835,000 visits, and that's just in one day, just to give you an idea. Thank you. Next slide. And it's just to give you also an idea of some of the places people work in the health and care sector. I think people always think it's hospitals, but actually 70% of healthcare is delivered outside of those busy hospitals. So dentists, care homes, day centres, hospices, GP practice we've mentioned, people's own homes, and care is being sort of turned around away from hospitals and much more focused now into the community settings, people's own homes, childcare facilities and residential, and as we know, opticians, sports injuries, a lot of work around laboratories, particularly now during COVID, prisons, we're supporting healthcare, and also schools, as I'm sure you're aware. So thank you. Next slide. And also just think about, it's not just about doctors and nurses, and we are told by schools, you know, whenever we do an assembly or we present about the NHS, talk about those other roles. And absolutely, these staff who aren't necessarily seen or providing patient care, but absolutely contribute to the patient journey. So really essential to the team. As you can see, there's a long list there, whether it's a biomedical scientist in a laboratory, our catering colleagues, security, thinking about providing that infrastructure, the safety, security, lighting and heating, and all the engineers we also need in the NHS as well. But also there's a much greater focus now on managers, accountants, human resource staff as well, and marketing. We also have design staff, and also librarians thinking about the evidence-based practice, the research, supporting our clinicians as well, and decontamination staff. There's a huge push for increasing theatre capacity as well, and all the staff involved in theatres, so whether that's the decontamination process, the anaesthetist or the support staff, all really key to our patient journey. Thank you. Next slide. And again, this is just to sort of break down all those different staff groups that are essential in the NHS. So you can see the sort of the typical areas of support to the doctors and dentists, nurses and midwives, but it's also about those other areas, so allied health professions, sort of the occupational therapists, physiotherapists, speech and language therapists, really essential, and paramedics within that. Managers, estates and sort of hospitality that we have, and also increasingly there's increase in IT data reporting and monitoring electronic patient records that we're having. So there's more and more focus now on the technology side, the data and information technology. Thank you. I just thought I'd go through briefly some of the typical entry points into the NHS. So apprenticeships are really key now into the organisation. There's a lot of money supporting apprenticeships. A lot of the bigger organisations have a certain levy or tax that they can only use for apprenticeship funding. So typically for a big organisation, you're talking a couple of £1 million at least just to focus on apprenticeships. So a lot of organisations are using this funding to support younger people coming into the organisation and also their existing staff. So whether it's to help them gain a degree or a master's, or to help them in their opportunity and development opportunities in their career pathways. So that's definitely becoming more and more popular, and we are focusing a number of workforce priorities and roles through apprenticeships, or a new nursing role has been created a couple of years ago called the Nursing Associate, and there's even going to be medical apprenticeships as well to become a doctor of next year. They can come in to us through entry level, so level 2, perhaps after GCSEs, young people, particularly in maybe business administration, catering, engineering, and also nursing skills, and up to at least master's level at the moment. There are volunteering opportunities. We work with St John's Ambulance, and also each larger organisation has their own volunteering department. Normally there's a commitment around 6 months to do that, but it is fairly flexible. Work experience is really key. We do offer it. I know the bigger trust in Oxford is offering face-to-face now. Whether that will be reviewed in light of recent COVID developments, but it's only just restarted. So it might well go back to be offering the virtual online work experience that we are working with a lot of our organisations to offer that in the meantime. The individuals can either watch films, complete activities, and access a certain number of resources that we've put things together for individuals wanting to access healthcare. T-levels. A lot of our trust partners are working with local colleges and schools, looking at industry placements and how they can support those safely in the learning environment. With the variety of students that we have, particularly health, science, and I know digital are being planned for as well. We also have NHS staff banks, so this is a temporary bank that individuals can work on a temporary basis and pick and choose where they work. They can also access working in the NHS following a completion of course at college or university, or after perhaps experience gained in other jobs and other careers. So there's really a lot of opportunities to access opportunities in the NHS at different times during people's careers. And I think the good thing about the NHS, it does recognise previous experience, skills, knowledge. And I think it's quite clear in terms of the job descriptions and the banding, which is what our agenda for change. So the typical salary that is paid for in the NHS, recognising those skills and knowledge. Thank you. Next slide. I put this in as a slide as just an example. It's a career pathway. This is set in radiology, but this could be in a typical department in a number of different areas within the NHS, and it's to really show the depth and breadth of roles, and this is just in one department. So looking at the slide from the right hand side, sorry the writing is a little bit small, but you can see from entry level typical roles that people could access typically after school, perhaps after GCSEs, a receptionist role, perhaps making appointments, very focused around administration using IT skills. And the typical salary there is sort of 18,500. That's probably what you're typically looking at, what's called a band 2. And then you can see the next potential role is a healthcare assistant or radiology assistant. And that's someone perhaps giving more and more hands-on care, that patient contact. Perhaps they require more on-the-job training, and typically working at a salary of a band 2 or a band 3, and they would require to acquire more advanced skills as they would then develop further. And from that, there's a potential career pathway of moving into becoming a nurse, whether they would then undertake that at university or through an apprenticeship or very much a work-based learning programme. And again, you can see the potential requirements in terms of A-levels, the time it would take and the salary that they would earn. And from a nurse, I think it's important to be able to show that career pathway, thinking I could then go up to the highest grade of nurse, be overseeing that department, overseeing the nursing team and a number of other perhaps healthcare professionals. And then it goes on to in a more specialist area such as sonographer, radiographer and radiologist, where individuals would need to study medicine. And it's just to show, and I think sometimes students are quite surprised at looking at the different salaries that sometimes it's more generous than they would initially think of working in the NHS, alongside the other benefits working in the NHS will bring, such as a good number of annual leave days per year. Thank you. Next slide. In terms of working for the NHS, it is a lot about the values and the individuals themselves and their characteristics. So we tend to talk very much around our values-based recruitment. Very often there are interviews, including value-based recruitment questions, so asking about scenarios and trying to gather that evidence from the individual, how they work in a team, how they would go the extra mile, how they would support people, how they would show dignity and compassion and that caring nature. But obviously, working more alongside patients, they would need to demonstrate more of those values. So it's just to stress that people, if they don't want to work with patients and they want to work in that back office function or in a laboratory, they can do. It's not all about that patient contact. There is a good array of careers and opportunities available, but it's important to look at the values-based recruitment as well. Thank you. Now, I have put in a number of resources. The main one really I would really stress is the health careers one at the top there. There are a number of films, events that we filmed, whether it's for nursing, science. Go to the next slides, please. There's medicine, about YouTube clips, about typical life in the day, individuals wanting to study medicine, dentistry or pharmacy. There's some top tips. There's also a virtual app to follow a patient journey in a GP practice. Thank you. In the next slide. And also the AHP, so there are allied health profession roles such as paramedics, and the WOW show offers some fantastic clips, films following a patient, and also some simulation technology as well. So I'd really recommend directing individuals to those. But just to sum up, I would definitely try and stress the different roles, the 300 different roles, and strengths around maths and science, and the variety in just maths alone with IT, finance, clinical engineering that we can offer in the NHS. And also thinking about the opportunities such as Step Into the NHS competition that is running for Key Stage 3 students that finishes April the 30th. Fantastic opportunity to learn more about the NHS and to get involved in that competition as well. Apprenticeship Week is coming up in February, Careers Week in March, and also Healthcare Science Week in March as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Claire. Really appreciate that. Any questions for Claire, again, just please pop them in the chat and we will come back to them afterwards. And now I'm going to hand over to Tasha. I've stopped sharing my slides for a bit, Tasha, because I know you probably want to talk first of all, and then let me know when to reshare Clara's slides.
Yeah, no problem. So hi, I am Tasha Nathani. I work at Rebellion as a senior technical producer. So I wanted to kind of talk a bit about the business in the sector, as I know Kiara and Kim are going to talk about a bit more about their job roles within the industry. So I'm kind of doing this divided. Unfortunately, I don't have any presentations or anything to show, so I'm just going to be talking. And if you do have any questions, please let me know. So the games industry as a whole is a really fast growing industry. We have a lot of tech involved. We're branching out into VR. There is such things like spatial OS, kind of world games as well. There's a lot going on in the industry that is always very fast growing, and it has a lot of skills involved as well, and it touches on a lot of different areas. You have people like myself who are coding, tech savvy, who like to get into the back end of the game. So we create the engines, we work on the code there, we create engines that kind of put the game onto, and that involves a lot of maths, physics. It involves a lot of kind of number skills like geography as well. So there's a lot of that going on there. You've got a lot of art and design, so more on the creative side. If you're not quite as technical, you can definitely go in the more creative side of it. So we have art and design, so that includes stuff like animation, technical animation. You will have level design as well. You'll have concept art, previs as well, which is really handy. Yeah, all sorts of stuff there. And we've got like quality assurance as well, which is generally used as a foot in the door, but it's also really good because it does give you exposure to the different games and how we test them and what happens there. Rebellion itself is really fast and growing too. So we're an independent studio based in Oxford, and we have been known for our kind of more work on Aliens versus Predator and some chart-topping games. And we also have our flagship enterprise, which is the Sniper Elite series, along with Strange Brigade and our acclaimed PlayStation VR launch title, which is Sniper, which is the Battlezone VR, sorry. And then we have 20 million players worldwide. So along with that, we've also recently acquired a film studio, which means that we also do films as well. Our most recent one is Schools Out, and we are also set to be looking after the new Judge Dredd TV show, which is Mega City 1, as well as the, which was it there? The new Duncan Jones film Rogue Trooper movie as well. So we do have a lot of different ventures. We also do comics as well. So we have the Judge Dredd comic series. So the creative sector is really, really well represented here with us. We have a lot of different avenues for kids to go into. We have a lot of different places and a lot of different areas that we reach. But we're not just game devs, although we are leading game publishing and whatnot. There's also a lot of support roles that we have as well. So we have HR, we have facilities and accounts, we have a legal team, we have marketing, we have community managers. So all of them are quintessential to the company to run. So there'll be a lot of kind of admin skills there. There'll be a lot of people skills, a lot of leadership going on. It takes a lot of variety of different personalities to make this work, with a lot of variety of different skills coming through there as well. A lot of things that people don't really realize that go into it, and common sense and forward planning being a couple of those. But it is a great industry to work in. There's always something going on. There's always something new cutting edge technology, which means that we constantly have to keep our skills up to date as well. The various routes that you can actually get into the industry, and I don't just mean for Rebellion, but for the industry as a whole, there are sort of like graduate programs available. So a lot of companies, a lot of studios will do a lot of graduate programs where they will look at how you've done for your application, for the years, for the uni, what you've kind of done in your portfolios. Portfolios are very important in this industry. It's really good to have a portfolio to demonstrate the work that you do in your spare time as well. So if you are a coder, it's really good to be shown in the sort of code that you do and what languages you use. So C++, Python, Linux, whatever you code in, those are going to be key. If you're an artist, you get yourself an ArtStation account and you show the different art styles that you do, you put them up, you show that the engines you're putting them into, if you want to put them into the engine, if you want to do just concept art, it's really good for you just to kind of see what students. So are you using Adobe, are you using Affinity, how did you come up with shaders? There's a lot to go there, and kind of portfolios are key as well. But yeah, so we'll do graduate programs. I know there's some studios, I don't think it's industry-wide, but there are some studios that do apprenticeships as well. It is something that I am looking into with Rebellion, and hopefully we can do something similar as well. But again, it's coming up to that point, and we're exploring different avenues to help the younger generation get into the industry as well. So if we've got those, you can also come in as a junior role. If you can't get a graduate, you can go out and get work experience. We have what we call junior roles as well. You apply to them, and they come in a similar fashion as well across lots of different various areas. And like I said before, we have our QA roles as well, which is a really good kind of all-rounder role for someone who wants to get into the industry but doesn't know quite what area they want to go into. QA is really, really good for exposing you to a variety of different things that happen in the game devs. It shows you how to test the game from preconception all the way through to launch and support. So you're there almost every step of the way. And it just means that, you can start to look at different areas you want to go to. So I know a lot of QA that go from being QA to production, or they'll go from QA to being level design or artist, because they've now had that exposure and they know where they want to go. They want to go after that. So there is a lot of variety, a lot of different roles. There's a lot of different everyday skills that you can pick up in school. and then take further into university or into an apprenticeship if there is one available to you, and you can apply through that as well. But yeah, I mean, as for my role personally, I started off in project management for a bank and a telecoms company, and I got offered a job working at Access Animation Studio in Glasgow. My skills were transferable from there. Project management, in a nutshell, is just knowing different methodologies. It's people management, knowing how to communicate with your team. It's being on top of things, looking out for bottlenecks, and seeing where everything falls into place in accordance to someone else's timeline as well. So what are your milestones? What do you need to do for what launch and where? It's really, really critical thinking, creative problem solving. There's a lot of forward planning as well. Once you kind of get into that rhythm, you start to go from there, and your skills are, it's quite interesting how transferable they can be from one industry to the next. And I've moved quite a lot, and I've found my place in games. It's where I really want to be, and I wouldn't want to be in any other industry. But I did find that I had to transfer a lot of my skills from my project management background to here, and it served me well. So yeah, I don't know if there are any questions for me there, but I'm going to pass over to Chiara because she has some slides and she'll be able to go into her role in a bit more depth than what I can. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Hold on, Chiara, I'm just bringing your slides up. If you give me 2 seconds. There you go, can you see those?
Yes, 1 second, I clicked the wrong button here. Hello, can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Hi, okay. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Chiara Tringali, and I am going to focus more on the specific role instead of like the company and just being on a general level. What does it mean to work in 3D animation? Please, next slide. So as you can see here, 3D animation is a graphic technique that utilizes motion in order to bring characters, objects, props, and more to life. All of these being in computers, assets generated in the computer. And the global 3D animation market size has 16 and 64 billion USD value in 2020, and is expected to just expand from a lot. Please, next slide. So if you can click on the video, you can get a bit of an idea of what 3D animation can look like.
It's not letting me click on the video for some reason, sorry. I'll send them through afterwards so people can see them.
That's great. That's great, perfect. But anyway, 3D animation, it can be used in various places, such as manufacturing, architecture, media and entertainment, which is where I'm located, in education, in defense, and even in healthcare, to illustrate different points on how different machineries can work. My personal specialization is 3D character animations, and there are a few different types. One is more realistic, so animation that is focused on replicating as close as possible how the human body moves, and it's usually in that kind of animation, motion capture is used to facilitate that process, to capture that realistic motion. And there is the stylized animation, which is more common in cartoons. For example, I don't know if you have seen recently Arcane or Kung Fu Panda, for example. This is definitely more stylized animation. There are also a subcategory of animation. There are cinematic animations, which are movies or cartoons, and game animations, which I'm going to talk about more in depth in a bit, but it's basically little building blocks that put in a row, they make a more complex animation. So maybe an asset that is like just a walking animation, another asset animation that is sitting down, and together they flow with a walking, sitting down animation. And that helps the player navigate the environment that it is created in 3D. Next slide, please. All right, my role and my journey. When I started being interested in this path by looking at the Kung Fu Panda movie and saying, hey, somebody must have made that. And I got interested and I started doing research on how that is made. That led me to attending Prada University of Applied Sciences, moving from Italy, where I'm from, to the Netherlands, where the university is. It's a really good university because it has a project-based learning where all different disciplines come together to create video games from scratch. And thanks to this opportunity, I was able to showcase what I've made in my 3 years of experience to during an open day, and I got in contact with a game animation company called Bohemia Interactive. And through an internship, I was able to work with them and learn a lot about how to work with motion capture and making games. Please, next slide. After that, I graduated and I freelanced for a year from the Netherlands. All the while applying to various companies, sending portfolios and working on personal projects to improve my personal animation skills. And I arrived to the UK thanks to the ambassadors, all the while keeping my eyes open for always new opportunities. And that's how I met Rebellion, who they gave me a bunch more of very interesting options to work on. Really recommend this company. Please, next slide. So next to my role, there are others that can be very interesting, and they kind of follow a similar path. There are character modelers that create the character puppet that we get to animate. There are riggers that make sure that let's say the puppet, the character, is strong so that the animators can then work on it. And then there are the technical animators that are an in-between between animators and riggers. And as you can see written here, they create better tools for either rigging or animating, and sometimes they animate themselves, but Kim is going to talk more in depth about that. And then there are game animators that, like I said, create a smaller animation that all put together make sure that all the characters in the game work and create different activities, while cinematic animator focus on a very specific scene, so that is meant to be experienced in one specific way. Please, next slide. The skills that are required for this kind of career, it's definitely a familiarity with at least one 3D software. There is a bunch of 3D software out there that have in common a lot of tools and functionalities, and once you know one, this knowledge is very easily transferable to others. So having some familiarity with a 3D software is key. Familiarity with the 12 principles of animations and body mechanics is crucial. There are books and classes on this online that are readily available. And it is important to showcase this knowledge in any kind of portfolio that an aspiring animator should show. And the ability of working in a team and asking for help. It is vital in this industry to because we create very intricate and complex products, which are video games or movies, and it is interdisciplinary, being able to get along with others and asking for help so that you don't spend days on a problem that can be solved by asking for help is going to save everybody a lot of time and a lot of stress. There is a need of always being willing to learn because like Tasha said, it's a very fast-growing industry. The technology is constantly evolving. So you need to be ready to learn the next piece of software, learn how to use a different engine. So willingness and a curiosity to learn is key, as well as passion for games and animation, because after the software crashes, there's so many times in front of you and you lose a bunch of progress, you need to be able to push through. Also, another important thing is to target what kind of animation you are more interested in. That's going to make it easier to create a portfolio and apply for the correct company. Because if you are more interested in cartoon animation, but then apply to a company that is interested in realistic animation, there is not going to be a match there. So it's going to be a lot harder to get a job at that point. It doesn't answer the request, let's say. Please, next slide. I would say something that would be really useful for students that are 12-year-old and up is definitely getting to learn some 3D software. Maya is the industry standard, and it would be great for students to learn the interface. Or alternatively, Blender is free, and there are a lot of just as many tools as in Maya. I have also put a couple of links there for free assets that students can play around with if they're interested. It's a lot of fun. Please, next slide. And these are links to some tutorials for Maya and Blender that I would really recommend if anybody is interested to understand what actually means to work with these kind of softwares. That's it. Please, if you have any questions, just write them down in the chat. That's all I got.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. Kim, did you have anything as well you wanted to add? I'm aware that we've only got about another 6 or 7 minutes and there are a few questions in the chat. So if you can sort of bring anything to the conversation for the next sort of 3 or 4 minutes, that would be great.
Yeah, that is fine. I didn't prepare any slides, but I could add some things that I wanted to talk about quickly. So
Brilliant.
I went to the whole same route as Chiara. I went to the same university, also in the Netherlands, so I don't have to talk about that. One thing that is very interesting about game development is that it's a super international work environment. Like more than half of your colleagues are always going to be from other countries. So if anyone is interested in working in an industry that gets you to different countries, gets you into different places, game development is definitely a good place to do that. There's so many opportunities to go to different countries. Now, game development in the UK, from what I heard, is a great place to start. I am officially on an internship, but it's actually a job. So it's very normal for game development in the UK to just offer you a junior role instead of an internship. Whereas in other countries, people could often get internships where they're not paid a lot. So I'm very happy to be here in the UK with Rebellion. Game development in general, I'd say, has pretty steady job security if you're motivated and you make your connections. You can get somewhere. It depends on what role you do. Obviously, if you do something programming heavy, it's easier to land a job than if you do something very artistic. That's basically in every industry the case. But game development has overall pretty steady job security. Now, it is very common that people get a game development degree somewhere before they go into the industry, but there are other ways to get into the industry as well. So there you could do, for example, any sort of film degree that has to do with visual effects or animation. Film and games are very interchangeable in their skills. But there are a bunch of other career fields that Tasha also already talked about. You can get into game development without a game development related degree, but it is a lot harder. If your skills are good, companies are going to hire you, but it's hard to land your first job if you don't have a degree to vouch for you. Personally, I do technical animation. Chiara already talked a lot about animation. But technical animation is a form of technical art, and all forms of technical art are kind of a bridge between programming and artists. So we create small tools, we make sure all the importing and exporting goes well between the engine and the artists, because often programmers and artists find it hard to talk to each other because they think in very different ways. So that's why you have technical art fields. Skills that you do in school that are very relevant, for example, to technical animation are Python. We work with Python a lot, so we don't do the very complicated programming languages that the actual programmers do, but we do write tools in Python, and we use a lot of algebra as well. It's not super complicated algebra, but it definitely helps. And I personally did some computer science in school, but it was always very focused on web development, making websites, etc. I think it would have been great if my school taught me something about engines or 3D software. There's so many free engines and 3D software packages out there, and they're used in so many different industries. It's really good, I think, for teenagers to learn how to work with 3D software. You can get into so many industries with that. I would have definitely loved to do that. I think Chiara went over everything else. That's what I wanted to add.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you to Tasha and Chiara as well. That's really, really helpful. If everyone wants to turn their cameras and if they want to ask any questions, please put your hands up. Or have we got any? Susan, have you been able to keep an eye on the chat, and have we got any questions in the chat for anyone?
Yeah, we've got one question here that was for Paddy. I've seen Paddy's been busy typing away to the other one, but Sarah Ann asked a question, Paddy, just saying, do you have geographers involved with this project? If so, what qualifications would you need to work with you? That's for you, Paddy.
Yeah, I'll probably give a politician's answer on that one and say yes, we absolutely do need geographers on the project. We have people with geography backgrounds working on a range of different roles within the project. In terms of what specific qualifications they'd need and what level they'd need to be, that would depend on obviously the job role, the seniority, and the particular sort of technical function within the business. But if we can park that as a holding answer, I will come up with a much more interesting and informative response as soon as I can outside of this call, if that's okay, Sarah Ann.
Brilliant, thanks Paddy. And the other one was from Joe.
Brilliant, thanks.
Yeah, I think Claire and Paddy have already answered Joe's question. It's all employers, what are the challenges you see within your profession, technical skills, knowledge, interpersonal skills. So just whether Tasha or anybody from Rebellion have got anything to add. I know Kim, you were talking about technical skills and sort of knowledge around that. Anything more to add, Tasha? Or Kim?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest skills you can have is being able to learn things fastly, especially in game development. Chiara already said it, like it's constantly new software, new ways of working. And if you can adapt to that and you don't get stuck on something you learned 10 years ago and you still want to do it that way, that's a very useful skill to have. But also communication is something that definitely lacks. The more technical the field gets, the less people start communicating with each other. And working with other people is in game development one of the best skills you can have, working as a team.
Fantastic, yeah.
So yeah, just to build on that, one of the things I've noticed, as I am a technical producer and I work in the technical sector of the games industry, the reasons that production exists is because a lot of people don't communicate within their own teams or outwardly. Not because they don't want to, it's an afterthought. They're so focused on actually doing their job, fixing things, or looking at code, or creating new wonderful worlds that they forget they need to talk to other people. So this is kind of what production do, is that we look at what's going on every day and we look at that and we say, right, well, have you communicated with such and such, and have you told them that there's a problem over here, and have you said this and this is going to affect that? That's kind of why producers exist. So yeah, interpersonal skills, communication, definitely something that is something that I've noticed a lot of, at least in my sector, where yeah, the more technical you get, the less is there. Common trait, I guess. But I think what is good to kind of start teaching kids early is how to identify different personalities that they're talking to, even if it's on a much more softer level. It doesn't have to be anything in depth, but learning how to talk to their peers and when to sit back and listen and not quite react to things that may annoy them is always going to be really beneficial, because this is skills that we're starting to pick up as adults and it's becoming a new thing. And if you can get that developed early, then that will put them in really good stead when applying for different jobs, because they should be able to hold themselves more professionally in interviews or in their application process. It will show that they have critical learning skills and critical thinking, because they're thinking about, well, who do I need to communicate with? How do I communicate with them? Is this something I need to react with? And they're always constantly thinking about who is their audience as well. So those sort of skills are really important for, I think, not just for the games industry, but for all jobs, all industries. Having that level of learning and that level of communication is going to be very beneficial for any future applications going forward.
That's great. Thanks, Tasha. I think that's all the questions that were in the chat, wasn't it, Susan? I think As you said, the other, so both Claire and Paddy, I'm just aware at the time, have answered those questions in the chat. So please do read those, because there's some really good, they're both given a really good insight into some of the challenges that there are within their sectors as well, which I think would be really good to pick up on. Anyone else got any other questions for any of our employers today? No, perfect. Thank you all very much, Paddy, Kiara, Kim, Tasha and Claire. Really appreciate your time with us, and Rebecca, great to have you here listening in as well. If the teachers can stay on just for a couple of minutes, I just want to, if I can, I just want to really quickly run through the evaluation process, but we can let our employers go now. But yes, thank you very, very much for your time. Really appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you for having us. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Right, I realise we are a bit over time, so if anyone does need to go, please feel free to go, because I will send this out via email as well. But I'm just going to very quickly, because I know we've communicated some stuff around the evaluation process, and I just want to very quickly just run through the details of this. So the next thing in terms of step one, so obviously the evaluation process is a really important part of this project. It's the reason we've received the funding is we're able to do some evaluation around this, so we can see the impact that enabling you to have more interaction with employers and build that into your area of the curriculum, the impact that has both for yourselves in terms of your knowledge, but also obviously importantly for the students that you teach as well, and their motivation and progress in your subject. So it's really important. This is a really important part of the process, and thank you to all of those already who have completed the teacher questionnaire. I know a number of you have done it in the last few days, so really appreciating you getting that back through to us. If anyone hasn't done it, if you could do that as soon as possible. The next piece of the sort of first step in terms of the evaluation process for the students is we need to get a data sharing agreement signed off by the relevant person in your school and returned to us by the end of the first week in January. That may be a different person within each of your schools. It could be certainly someone on the senior leadership team, a business manager, someone in the office. But if you can find out who is responsible for signing off a data sharing agreement, which ensures that we're allowed to sort of share data between ourselves, that will be really helpful, and then we can get that through to them to check through and sign off. We have also got a letter to go out to all parents who are going to be in the Year 8 class that you're going to be using as for this evaluation. So the students that you'll be asking to complete the surveys. We've got a template for that, which we will send over to you. I'll get it over to you tomorrow morning. And again, our recommendation is this goes out, if possible, before the end of the term to the parents of those students in that class. I realise we're really close to the end of term and you've got a huge amount going on. So if it is too much, I don't want to feel like I'm asking too much, but if it is too much, please just let us know. But it's an opportunity for parents to opt out if they don't want their children to be part of that evaluation. Obviously, they're still going to be part of your lessons and they're still going to get the benefits from the lessons, but it may well be that students don't, parents don't actually want them to take part in that evaluation, and we need to give them that choice. Step 3 is we'll also send you the management information template, and Christina showed this on the call a couple of weeks ago. You will need to assign each of the students in that Year 3 class a unique code. All the unique codes are there, you just need to put the student names against them. The management information template will also ensure that you also register what activities you've run and which students attended which activities, just so we have a good idea from the research perspective in terms of the impact that individual activities have had on those students' thinking. So we will send those through to you. I'll send everyone their MI forms separately. They don't need to be returned to us until much later in the project, but obviously you get the unique codes from those which you will need for step 4, which is for students to complete their survey. So the first survey link will come out to you, and students will need to complete that between the 14th and the 28th of January. So you've got a couple of weeks for them to do that, and they will need that unique code for that. So the only part of that MI form you need to do is literally put a student name against a unique code, ensure the students have that unique code to then complete their survey. So that's all the sort of first initial parts. It probably sounds more complicated than hopefully it is. When we actually get around to doing it, it'll be hopefully quite an easy process. It then won't be again until sort of late May, early June, where there'll be a second survey for both students and yourselves to complete by the end of June. Again, the unique code will be needed for the student survey, so you need to make sure you keep those unique codes. That's so we can see individual students and the journey that they've had. So we're seeing if there's any, because as part of the management information system, we do want to know about there are a couple of sort of key things that we want to know, such as gender and pupil premium students. So that way we can see whether what you've actually delivered has had more impact on maybe females or males, or also whether it's had more impact on those pupil premium students than other students, so we can see what impact it's had on those various groups. So yes, that second survey will come out in May, June for you to complete, and then, as I said, we'll need that management information form returned to us with all student names deleted. We don't want any student names coming back to us by the end of June as well, and that's when the CEC will take over and start doing the whole research piece and be able to come out with the report. So I will send this all through with all the documents I've mentioned. Anyone has any questions, Susan is, as I said, working very closely with you with regards to the projects and activities that you want to deliver. Any questions around the evaluation process, please do come to me and ask, and I will do my very best to support you with that, and I'll sort of lead on that sort of going forward. So yeah, any questions, do let me know. Does anyone have, is that quite clear to everyone, or does anyone have any initial questions that I can answer now? Stunned everyone into silence, so I'm hoping that that's fairly clear, but you will get an email from me tomorrow morning with further detail, with all of those details. The only other thing I was going to say was around comms as well, very quickly. We've got some great photos from when you came to Harwell, which we're more than happy to share. If you do want to put anything, I don't know, in a school newsletter about you working on this project, or anything else, any sort of social media or anything like that that you might be active on, that you want to talk about the project, then do get in touch and we can share with you some of those photographs. We will be doing some comms sort of in the new year to sort of promote what's actually happening. Obviously we'll be doing more comms at the end of the project as well, but we'll keep you very much informed with that, and ensure that you're completely engaged on what we're doing around that. But in the meantime, if you want to do anything yourself, then do let us know and we can get some of those photographs over to you. Sarah, okay, we'll get some pictures over, that's fine. Anyone for anything else? So AOB was the last piece on our agenda. I realise we're 9 minutes over now. But anything else at all at the moment? We're next meeting, I think it's January, is it the 14th or the 10th? I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's the 14th, when we're going to talk about pathways. So a little bit more information from some of our partners in terms of, obviously, as I said, all of you will have come through the route of going on probably into higher education. Some of you may have worked then in industry and then gone into teaching, but all of you will have gone through that higher route, higher route sort of pathway. And I think it's important as part of this, not because in any way, shape or form you're going to become careers advisors, but just to give you a flavour of what those other pathways are and what they look like. So that's going to be the next webinar, and then we have our final sort of employer panel towards the end of January, and we've already got BMW signed up for that, Pivot Power, who are working around green energy, and I'm thinking who else we've got signed up for that one at the moment. Susan, I can't remember off the top of my head, but we've got some great employers for that one as well, so it'll be good to see you all there. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas. I bet if you're anything like us, we're crawling towards the end. So I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas break, and don't forget to just reach out to Susan and I with any questions you've got in the meantime.